Welcome to Two Roads Crossing, a podcast production of the Christian Veterinary Mission. Do you wonder how your faith fits together with your profession? Well, join us as we explore how to live well at the intersection of two roads crossing.
Well, hello and welcome to Two Roads Crossing. My name is Barry Schwenk. I'm a veterinarian, a pastor, and your host as we explore the intersection of faith and veterinary medicine. The Christian Veterinary Mission was founded back in 1976 when Dr. Leroy Dormany was convicted by God to share the love of Christ with others through his profession. And that has been kind of the proposition that CVM has been dedicated to ever since 1976. But what exactly makes veterinarians so well suited for this type of service? And how exactly do you make that transition? How do you go from being a veterinary professional here in the United States to maybe serving internationally? And that's the question that we're going to be asking today with our guest, Dr. Daniel Graham. Good afternoon, evening, morning, depending on who's listening to this, when and where. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing, Barry?
I think I'm doing pretty good. I can't complain too terribly much. I have not had to put gutters on my house recently, so
well, that's how I spent my morning.
Yeah, so there you go. So I must be doing pretty darn good. Yeah. Well, I wanted to talk with you today, not just because I think actually you have the distinction now that I have talked with Rachel and you're the first couple then that have appeared on Two Roads Crossing. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. We should do like some sort of romantic Valentine's Day episode sometime.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Talk about veterinary romance on the field.
Yeah, we'll put a pin in that one and come back to it some other time. Or maybe get to that necropsy story of Fred and Vicky's. That would be a good one. I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't do that. I was really looking forward to chatting with you because so not only has your family served in Uganda for 9 years, but after returning, you kind of stepped into a role, kind of a newer role for CVM, the Mission Mobilization Strategist. And you're kind of right in the forefront of that transition period for a lot of veterinary professionals going to the field. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. Do you want to maybe explain a little bit first, what exactly is that role and what's your primary duty with CVM at this point?
Sure. So Missions Mobilization Strategist, it sounds very fancy.
It does.
It makes me seem a lot more important than I am. But what it means is just I get the privilege of helping to coach people through our application process for long-term service. So specifically in regards to long-term mission, mobilizing folks as in advertising placement opportunities. Where could we use vets internationally? And then being the first point of contact for people who want to go out long-term with CVM, helping them through our application process, figuring out kind of what they're going to do, where they're going to go, and then coaching them through that pre-field process, thinking through their training and what it's going to take to prepare them to go. And helping getting them launched. So half of my job is focusing on those individuals who are coming through the process. But then the strategist part of it is also stepping back and thinking about our big picture of what we're doing in missions as CVM, and thinking through that strategy of where can we be most useful as an organization? Where can our missionaries be most impactful? What kind of work can we be engaging in that's going to create the biggest benefit for the communities that we serve in? And so it's a lot of fun. I get to think and I get to interact with people every day.
Well, that's an awful lot. I mean, there's two whole conversations that we could have from that because when you think about it. And this is something that I think that we run into on a pretty regular basis, or at least we did, prior to going to the field and even afterwards. just the understanding of what a veterinary missionary actually is, because there most folks have ideas of what a missionary is supposed to be, and yet it's hard to kind of reconcile a veterinarian in that role. So what exactly, helps veterinarians be well suited for the task at hand? And then what are some of those maybe preconceived notions that we need to kind of let go of to maybe see, the opportunities that veterinary professionals can actually serve in?
I think as veterinarians, we have a really strong understanding of the scope of veterinary medicine, what all is included, wrapped up in the field of veterinary medicine. But I think most people outside of our profession don't have a strong perception of kind of the variety of roles that we have training and expertise in. So even within the US, you get this. When you talk about being a veterinarian in the States, people's perception is that you vaccinate puppies and kittens all day. And you just get to play with puppies, and that is the job description of a veterinarian. And they miss kind of the deeper, sometimes more challenging parts of clinical work as a veterinarian, but also the other things that are outside the clinic, where most people are interacting with veterinarians. The regulatory vets, nobody likes to think about all the vets working in abattoirs and in food safety, the public health vets. There's a lot of variety even within the States of what veterinarians can do, and people miss that a lot of times within the States. And so making the jump to overseas, people miss those same nuances of, well, if my understanding of what a veterinarian is that they vaccinate my puppy and my kitten for me, what are they doing overseas? How is that useful? And so, yeah, it's always an interesting conversation. When we raised support to go overseas, there was always people, when you would tell them that you're a veterinarian and you're going overseas to be a missionary, it's a lot of blank stares from people you can see their brain working, trying to connect the dots of what in the world are you talking about. And so just helping talk through with people, what does it look like in the rest of the world for people to live? How are they interacting with animals? And for the majority of people, it's going to be a lot different than how people are doing that in the US. In many parts of the developing world, people have a very strong connection with their livestock, but in a subsistence kind of way, as a primary means of providing for their families. They are dependent on the animals that they keep, and so they have a very deep relationship with their animals, but in a very different way than we as Westerners, as Americans, have a deep connection with our animals, mostly our pets. So yeah, that's to answer the first part of your question. That's where I think veterinarians can be really useful in missions. In a lot of developing countries, really strong need for services that help take care of those animals that people rely on day to day for their subsistence, especially in cultures where the entire cultural system is wrapped up in livestock. For example, a lot of nomadic peoples, a lot of tribal peoples that we worked with in Uganda have a very strong cultural connection to their cattle. And a lot of their cultural practices are centered around their cattle production, and nomadic in the sense that their communities will shift and move based on the needs of their cows. So yeah, a lot of really practical needs that veterinarians can address, and a lot of deep kind of relational connections that can be made with people through their livestock. So I think that's why veterinarians can be really useful overseas.
Yeah, it's when we think about traditional missionaries, and this was always the thing that we came face to face with, which is most people think about missionaries as being street preachers, living in the bush, and the idea that a veterinarian, trying to juxtapose what we understand about a veterinarian onto that, is really tough. But one of the best things that we have going for us as veterinarians is our ability to build relationships rather quickly. I always tell people, it's when I'm on an airplane, I now have the luxury of choosing when someone asks, what do you do for a living? If I want to talk to them for the entire flight, I say veterinarian. If I don't want them to talk to me, I say pastor, and then most of them will turn the other way and just let me rest. But as a veterinarian, we have this ability to make these instant connections, and globally, the thing that's in between that helps us build might be a cow, might be a goat, might be a rabbit, might be some sheep, might be a dog, might be a cat. But regardless, it's still the availability to be able to make that connection that's so important.
And it's a connection, but it's also a connection built on trust.
Yes,
and building trusting relationships, not only beneficial in your clinic in the States, but also overseas, when our goal is sharing the gospel in a community that might otherwise be resistant to the gospel. A trusting relationship built around the care of an asset that is so deeply important to them can be a really fantastic way to start that relationship.
Oh, absolutely. Just this week at the clinic, I had to walk with a client through the euthanasia of her dog. Had never met her before. It was the first time we had ever engaged at any level. And as we're standing there, she turns to me and just asks me, do you think that Jesus will be with my dog? And just out of the blue, like just a complete, I'm like, wow, that's an immediate open door for a conversation. And the fact that in those vulnerable moments, and, when you love something that someone else loves, you have that shared bond, it allows you to have those really intimate conversations really quickly, because that level of trust does get built rather quickly. And it's also kind of an important thing, I think, for veterinary professionals just to realize, because we don't want to take advantage of that trust either. We need to protect that trust. And as believers, I think it's important for us to walk those journeys with people and to show love and kindness and compassion, but also to be very forthright and honest as well. Globally, we see so many different places where people can connect. Do you see veterinarians, or maybe let me rephrase this? How do you see veterinarians in a gospel sharing, church planting kind of a connection? Because we get the understanding of, okay, we can vaccinate goats, we can spay dogs and cats, but how do we make that gospel connection?
I think that is often a struggle for people to grasp that connection. Even for us as veterinary missionaries, sometimes we don't bring that holistic perspective to the work that we do. And I think this is true for other professions as well. I think that kind of the traditional perspective on ministry roles is around this, a professional working in ministry, like what you were talking about earlier, the perceptions of what a missionary is, the pastor, the evangelist, the church planter. That's what a missionary is. And even in the States, we think about those are the things of ministry, preaching, teaching Bible studies, working in children's ministry. Those are ministry things. Everything else is therefore not a ministry thing. And I think that is an unnecessary dichotomy. I think that when we look at the idea of worshiping God, bringing glory to Him, I think that's not a category of particular activities that we do, but it should be woven and integrated into all of our activities in life. Whatever we do it to the glory of God. And so that can be in the States or it can be overseas. So if I'm working as a veterinarian in a clinic or in whatever capacity I'm doing it, that can be a ministry role, depending on how I approach it, what my attitude is towards it, how I'm interacting with the other person, and my intentionality in making it centered around Jesus and around His story and sharing the gospel. not just through my actions, but in the words that I say. So as a missionary overseas, making that connection, I don't think that missionaries are restricted to the traditional roles of pastor, evangelist, church planter. I think that there is usefulness and roles in all professions serving for the kingdom. And so whether you're a veterinarian or a doctor, a nurse, a teacher, a mechanic, an engineer, whatever you are, you can use your skills and abilities that God has given you to serve him, his kingdom, and the people that are around you, and to leverage those opportunities of service that you have to share the gospel wherever you are.
And that's one of the things I think that for folks that are listening that may, whether you're a veterinary professional or not, it would be one of the reasons why I would encourage you to get connected to organizations like CVM, right? Mm-hmm. We have wonderful opportunities and resources. We have people who have been doing this for a really, really long time. We have people who have been practicing here in the U.S. For decades and have been doing so in a way that is God honoring, and having mentors, and hearing the stories of people that have been working on this intersection of faith and veterinary medicine for most of their lives. It's a real, not just an encouragement, because as people start to question, where do I fit into this? What's my calling? How am I supposed to marry these things together? It allows you to see God at work in someone else's life, and allows them to kind of pour into you, and to give you those pieces of advice, and in order to help kind of nudge you along in your own faith journey, which is kind of what I envision your role as the missions mobilization strategist. You need to add a few more words to that. It seems like there needs to be just a little bit fancier, or at least it maybe on your signature on your emails, it has to be in cursive, just to give it a little bit more pop to it. But
I think that even though sometimes the strategist word at the end, it sounds a little bit arrogant sometimes, but the reason I like that it's there in that title is that it reminds us that these things don't happen accidentally.
Right.
We don't stumble into them. Right. Just because you're a Christian doesn't mean you are necessarily sharing the gospel. Mm-hmm. Just because you're a Christian doesn't mean that you are automatically integrating it, your faith, into the work that you're doing as a veterinarian or whatever your profession is. Mm-hmm. I think that there has to be some intentionality in it, some thoughtfulness in it, and some awareness of what's going on to do it, and to do it well.
Well, and that was leading into my next question, because what I was going to say is that I think that this role that you find yourself in right now is a wonderful role in helping people to discover that intentionality, and to be more forthright, and to be more thoughtful about whether it's for long-term missions. I realize that's kind of your area of focus, but whether it's long-term missions, short-term missions, using your profession, even if you're not a veterinary professional, using your profession, your skills in a God-honoring way, requires some thoughtfulness. If someone were to come to you and they're saying, look, God has really been kind of weighing on my heart that maybe I need to be leaning towards long-term missions, what's that beginning process for them? How do you take those first steps with them? What do you encourage them to do? What are some of the things that you have to help them overcome to take that next step in order to get a little bit further down the road?
I like to start that out with just a conversation, just like this. I want to sit down with somebody and get to know them, and to hear what God has been doing in their lives, and their perception of what is God currently doing in them. So I want to talk with somebody about, how did they come to Christ? What is their faith story and their faith journey? Because I think that what has happened in our lives historically, I think people should be able to verbalize it and share it, certainly, but that also drives kind of the trajectory of where we're going, and how we continue to see God at work in our lives, and how we serve him. So I want to hear that that story from people, just to get to know them better and see how God's been at work in them. I want to talk to people about their church engagement. Where are they going to church? How are they serving? What does their church community look like for them? Because going into long-term missions, it's not a solo thing. This is a group process. This is your community coming around you, affirming what God is doing in your life, and sending you out from their midst to go and serve on their behalf overseas. So this isn't just about you as an individual making a decision that God's leading you overseas. I want to hear how your community is engaged in that process with you. I want to talk to you about your ministry experience, if that's missions experience overseas or how you're serving in your church now. I want to hear about your perception of your spiritual gifts for ministry, and how God has uniquely equipped you to serve Him, the people around you, the church. What are your skills and abilities in that? What are your interests and passions? What are the things that get you excited about? I want to hear all of those things. And you'll notice at this point in the conversation, the veterinary skills are on the back burner at the moment.
Right.
I want to hear about your faith journey and how God is at work in you and your experience in ministry and your engagement in church. That is one thing that I really love to encourage veterinary students with. So any students on the call, if you think you want to go into long-term missions, and even if you don't, even if you're just a believer, you have got to get engaged in a church where you are. Be committed in a discipleship relationship, engage in ministry there. I think it is it's a misperception of vet students that they just don't have the time to do that, right. They'll get involved in a church after vet school. And God designed us to be in community with others. So when I hear that you have a bent towards long-term missions as a vet student, I want to see now that your spiritual formation is a part of that long-term preparation process. So that's how I begin the conversation with somebody is I want to begin spiritually, even before we get to the technical skills of are you large animal, small animal, or do you have teaching skills? What are you board certified in something? And we can leverage that overseas. Before we get to any of that, I want to just kind of think about you as a person, and how you are engaged with Jesus and His church.
Yeah, that's really important. And I thought, even for myself, the first short-term mission trip I ever took, I was so very concerned about, exotic diseases and things like I really wanted to dig into the procedures and the medicine and the drugs and all the things that I thought, that I needed to get sharpened on, that it was really easy to neglect just the spiritual side of things. And then once you go and serve, you realize that without that component, that you're in big trouble if you haven't been working that direction.
I think a lot of veterinarians, they kind of sell themselves short about some of those skills. A lot of us have imposter syndrome. We don't think that we're really qualified to be doing the things that we're doing. And so when it comes to missions, short-term and long-term, people kind of get hung up on, well, I don't know the foreign animal diseases. I don't know the locally available medications. I don't know the systems and processes. Can I really spay a cat under a tree? Can I do these things? And what we try to really help people with is to think bigger picture than that. God can give you grace for those things, but there's also some other things that you need to consider that you might not have otherwise considered. So part of our application process in helping people to prepare to go is we do a learning needs assessment with everybody. And so it looks like an Excel spreadsheet with a lot of numbers and a lot of questions on it, and people don't like tests, but really what it is, it's just a tool to help you think about things that you might not have otherwise thought about. We get hung up on the foreign animal diseases, like that's what I need to know before I go overseas. Well, here are 100 other things that you might not have otherwise thought about. How prepared are you in these categories? Are you have you thought through? Are you prepared for the spiritual welfare, spiritual warfare aspects of what might be going on? Are you prepared with kind of a basic understanding of what missions is? Are you able to verbalize and to share the gospel with people? Have you thought about these things? Have you thought about the logistics of proposal writing and preparing a report and doing the bookkeeping skills that will be necessary? Have you thought about working on diverse intercultural teams? Have you thought about all of these other aspects that are out there, not to just to discourage someone or to overwhelm them with all of the things that they're going to face, but just get them thinking outside the box a little bit and to say, oh, maybe I didn't think about that. And maybe I need to pursue some additional training in that area. And what we find with almost everyone is the areas where they pursue additional training are almost never in the veterinary medicine aspects. They're almost always in the other ministry aspects, the Bible and theology, the discipleship training, community development training. Those are the types of things where people, when their eyes are opened a little bit, they realize, well, those are the things I need to be focusing on to be successful in ministry. The veterinary skills, I can pull the book off the shelf. I can remind myself of those things. I can be successful in other ways.
So that strategist title has been well placed, sir. Well, it's good because I
try.
Yeah, well, you're doing a great job. For most folks, I think that if you're listening to this, regardless of whether it's long-term missions or not, to take any step forward, you want to be well prepared and you want to be intentional about where you're stepping into next, and that requires some forethought, and it requires, we even in marriage counseling, I talk a lot with couples about learning how to act and not falling back to reaction. So instead of reacting, choosing to act, because when you spend all that time focused on how you're going to act and how you're going to proceed, it makes it so much easier for you to control the reactions that may be misplaced, that may get you into trouble down the road. And whether it's, certainly with missions, it's something that it's more than just understanding a few zoonotic diseases. There's a lot more to it. And honestly, do you find that even from a mission retention, is it usually the veterinary medicine that gets people to say that, oh, this is well beyond what I'm capable of, I need to leave the field? Or is it some of these other skills that just haven't been developed? I mean, that's kind of the...
No, Barry, I think you're absolutely right. I have never heard anyone say that. That the level of veterinary medicine that they're practicing internationally is far beyond their skills. I when I lived in Uganda, I had amoxicillin, and if that didn't work, then sometimes I could find some cephalexin, and if that didn't work, well, that's the extent of my treatment.
That was it.
That's what I had available, and so you work with what you have available, and it's usually pretty limited. I wasn't sending animals for advanced diagnostics. I didn't need to remember what all of the values on a chemistry would mean, because I couldn't get a chemistry. I could do a physical exam, and that was it. And I had my 5 medications, and that was it. So you get good with those things, and so nobody's going to come back and say, well, I just couldn't cut it.
What was that amoxicillin dose again? I can't handle it. I can't remember.
Oh, man. There's some unique challenges trying to figure out how to do what you need to do with only 5 medications on your shelf. But I think that that veterinarians, we tend to be high achievers. We want to be good at what we do, and when we identify a need, we want to, we're trained to diagnose and then develop a treatment plan, and then to assess our treatment plan. Did we succeed? And so we identify a need. Well, I need to know about this aspect of community development on the field. Here's my treatment plan. I need to go out and I need to do these trainings so that I'm prepared to do this. And I think we can overwhelm ourselves with thinking, I need to be an expert in all of those things before I put these things into practice. And so how what I would want to encourage people listening to this is, again, don't be overwhelmed by all of these different things that we've mentioned, but realize you will get into situations where you feel in over your head. And that's when you reach out for the additional resources and the training.
Right.
You don't have to be an expert on all of these things before you go, because some of these things, you might think, I really need to. Before I went to Uganda, I did a bunch of reading and a bunch of training on microfinance development. I thought that would be really useful. Was it? Maybe. I used it a little bit, probably not as much as was for the amount of training that I did on it pre-field. So I would like to encourage people, get out there, get their feet wet, start engaging in ministry, whether it's in the States, whether it's short-term, whether it's long-term, just start engaging, and then your eyes will be opened to see what are the actual needs in the community and in myself. Where are my deficits? And then you go and you seek the training to make up the gaps. When we got to Uganda, I went to do livestock-based community development. That was my role. Before that, I was a small animal practitioner in the States. I knew very little about livestock, but I learned it as I went for the level that I needed to achieve the job role that I had. Over time, through a series of events, we were working under our local church in Uganda, and I ended up as the missions and discipleship coordinator for the church. So very different experience for me. Then we ended up opening a Bible school as part of the church. And because I was the missions and discipleship coordinator, I automatically inherited the Bible school that we opened. Our Ugandan pastor that we were working with said, it fits within your department. This is your responsibility now. So all of a sudden, I had a 1-year Bible school that I was running, and I had full-time students, and I was writing curriculum the night before that we were teaching it.
Yeah.
And I realized very quickly, my veterinary education did not prepare me to run this Bible school. But now that I'm here and I'm seeing where the need is, now I can go back and pursue the training that I need. So I went back from Uganda. I did an online seminary degree. I did a master's in global leadership to help to do my job better. Did I need to do that before I left? No. I think there comes a point where we need to stop preparing. We need to go and see where the needs are. Then we can kind of regroup and figure out what we need to do to address the circumstances that we're in.
The truth is, you don't have to know everything in order to do something. And that can sometimes get us hung up. Well, I appreciate you.
But also not an excuse.
That's right.
To just go out there and think that you are the end all be all and you can do anything.
It's true.
Not an excuse to do that, but to rely on God's grace.
But is his grace sufficient?
I think so.
I think so. There should be a verse or something like that. I think that would be. Well, I appreciate you talking with us a little bit about mobilization. I think that for everyone listening, it would be good for us just to maybe revisit some of those preconceived notions that we have, because I would suspect that for a lot of us, we have put off doing some of the things that maybe God has been calling us to do under the guise of maybe not knowing enough or not having all of the information in advance. But if God's leaning you that way, if God's pressing upon you, and no matter where it is that he's taking you, whether it's long-term missions, short-term missions, engaging within your community, working within your church, there's a level of intentionality that has to be brought into it. We need to be open to going where God has been leading us, to learn the things that he's desiring for us to learn, so that we can lean more on his understanding and his wisdom and his strength through it all. And that's a challenging part in life, no matter where it is that you seem to be finding yourself right now. I can guarantee you that if you begin looking at his calling with intentionality, you will be learning how to live well at the intersection of two roads crossing.
Thank you for listening to Two Roads Crossing, a podcast production of the Christian Veterinary Mission. If you were blessed by this content, like and subscribe so that you are alerted when new content is released. If you would like more information about CVM, or if you have questions, comments, or topical suggestions, you can find us online at www.cvm.org. Or you can contact us by emailing podcast@cvm.org. God has a plan for the nations, and that plan includes you. We pray that CVM has encouraged you to live out your calling with confidence and competence. So, until next time, may the voice of the shepherd ring loud and clear as you follow him in faith to the intersection of two roads crossing.